You know what? Thank you guys so much for joining me for what I know will be a robust and just very rich conversation with the really the legendary Phillip Boone, who really is iconic, but he helped found and create what we now know as the iconic Traxx Atlanta nightclub. So it's just jumping right into it. Phillip, thank you so much for coming out and
Thank you, Zackory.
being with me to share space and engage. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great, Zackory. Thank you for inviting me here.
You know, it, I've done my research. I've done a little bit of reading, a little bit of researching, and I found that you and your partners, your colleagues, your friends, your family came together and started what ultimately became Traxx Atlanta in 1983.
Yes.
That would make this the 40th anniversary of the work that you've done to contribute to Atlanta's black gay scene. What started you from what was the beginning of this? How did this start in 1983 for those who do not know?
Well, I think what basically became was my cousin and I saw that there was a lack of um, ownership when it came to going to bars and things here in the 80s. Um, we used to try to get in Bulldogs back then. When I moved here, you would need three IDs to get in. So we would go to the Armory or Back Street or places that would allow us to get in without all the hassle. So we just started doing parties at our apartment. A buddy of myself, Randall Vaughn, David Hampton, we were working at the Ritz Carlton. Said, let's start doing parties. And it came from K11, is where all the house parties started from. And then that led to just renting different facilities throughout the city and giving ourselves a name called the Ritz Boys, which was the first name that we actually had as a promotion company.
You said and gave some great points I want to share because there are a lot of people who are going to watch this and see this and they don't know the history of Atlanta and the black gay scene. Bulldogs is now one of the most trusted staples in the black gay community in the city of Atlanta and now probably around the world. Everyone knows Bulldogs.
Hmm.
But in 1983, the club Bulldogs, which opened in 1978, didn't want you there. They didn't want black people in that space. Can you
Correct.
tell us about that?
Well, the South has always had the Bible Belt curve, what they call it, where there is a stigma of growth amongst different ethnicities. And that was part of what was going on back then. So my cousin was going to Morehouse at that time. I moved
And
from
that's
Michigan
David
here, David
Hampton.
Hampton, um, rest in peace. And so, by us living up north, we had a different sense and mentality than the brother that may have grew up here in Atlanta. So we were for moving forward and not having no and you can't in front of us.
But did you find there were some black men in the city who were not of the same mindset?
Well, of course, of course, of course. Back then, you didn't have a lot of that going on. That environment where you had people forging ahead in the gay community, in the aspect of just moving forward as far as being a black man, living in Atlanta, Georgia, or in the world, sure, but the movement of the black gay community moving and having a safe haven to party in hadn't been drawn in. I think the only really safe haven back then was the Marquette.
So the Marquette was still there, predating
Yes.
Bulldogs and the Traxx.
Well, now I don't know what year if they were here before Bulldogs.
But before 1983, you had the Marquette.
Well, we didn't have the Marquette.
Well, I'm saying it
well,
was
yeah,
open.
it
It
exists.
exists.
Yeah. When I moved here in 1982, the Marquette was on Martin Luther King.
See, I didn't know that. That's a piece of history that I did not know. And I tried, I came to Atlanta in 2002, but it's just been for me, like, I just love history. I love knowing the past, knowing the people that have done groundbreaking work, that have laid a foundation for where we are today, because there's so many lessons that you can draw from and learn from that.
Yeah, Jimmy and his dad basically started the Marquette, and that place was originally right there on MLK in the Morehouse District area on the hill next to the funeral home. That's right there.
Wow.
And there used to be a parking lot right there, and they used to be late night, and then they moved over to where they are now. But that was the only really black-owned club back then at that time.
Oh my God! So we owe a debt of gratitude to the Marquette.
Oh yeah.
In addition, so one thing that I think also in what you said in your opening statement was that you guys started in 1983 having house parties, and it grew from there. And I think that Traxx, from what the Traxx that I went to, opened in 1989, 91.
It was 89. 1989 was when we my cousin David became the manager at the warehouse, which used to be the Phoenix at 339 Marietta Street. And so most clubs back then, and we call that a club, it wasn't a bar, it was a club because of the high ceilings and the capacity that we could put in there. Most clubs could only have one night. You couldn't have a Friday and Saturday where they were two straight nights back to back. So the owners came to my cousin and asked, maybe do you guys want to do a gay party there on Saturdays? They had a great Friday night, which was the warehouse, where Ludacris, Little John, all those guys kind of grew up with us there also, which is another whole entity to the business. And so we started doing Traxx in 1989 on Saturday.
At the warehouse.
At the warehouse.
At the warehouse. And so it just came from an organic relationship that David had working there with the management to bring you guys in. Was management surprised at how successful Traxx Atlanta became?
Well, James Mason was one of the licensees there, and he was gay, and so he knew the work that we had already put in as far as doing parties around the city, and know that it was probably the right time to do that.
You also talk about connections with some of Atlanta's famous entities like Ludacris, right? I would imagine that in your time with the legendary, iconic Traxx, there were a number of celebrities and famous people that you guys brought to the city that came through. Is there anyone that stands out to you in your memory as this person, when you met them, you knew that they were going to be a star, or someone who came through those doors that really impressed you?
I can tell you not the first person, but the one person that always stands out is Fabo. Fabo, the male rapper here in Atlanta. Fabo was the only male rapper that would perform for a gay audience of males. He's the only one that ever performed for us, and that was at the Georgia International Convention Center, and I always give him kudos for that. Other than that, Martha Wash, CeCe Peniston, we've had Super Bowl parties with Deion Sanders with the warehouse side, where Mary J. Blige, Evander Holyfield, Tupac, we've had all those people come through those doors. DJs, it's been a ride.
So, with that, and talking about these famous guests and the people that you've had in, how did the city of Atlanta support or not support Traxx and the concept of having this black gay experience in the heart of Atlanta, so close to Centennial Park, so close to like downtown. How was that response?
We had a very good relationship because I was one of the type of owners where I didn't have lawyers and things do my paperwork. I did it myself to learn the business, and so I knew everyone at City Hall, and they knew me, and we had a great rapport.
Who's been your favorite mayor?
Um, what's her name?
Shirley Franklin.
Shirley Franklin.
Okay. I
And then,
won't ask who's been your
before,
least.
before
but just your
Shirley,
favorite.
though, Bill Campbell
You like
was
Bill.
really good to the city. He was really good to the city.
Yeah, I have heard good things about Bill too. We all know
was.
how that ended, but I also
Yeah.
have heard good things. So, how would you characterize, if you could pick one word to summarize the first and longest iteration of Traxx, what would that one word be?
Um, uh, Setting high trends, trends that I'm still looking for to be broken. I just feel that maybe we were ahead of our time in some aspect when it came to entertainment, and we wanted to do it big.
There is no doubt
Yeah.
that Traxx Atlanta and the 4 founders that came together to make this happen were innovators and far ahead. And you're absolutely right. It hasn't been duplicated, and we don't see it now.
Mm-hmm.
And the question is, Phillip, why don't we see it now?
I really can't tell you the mindset of these other promoters and people who are just in the industry that are out here right now. I can't tell you why they don't reach for higher goals other than the ones that they have. I just knew that we liked putting on productions and things that would ooh and ah the gay crowd. And that was the thing about that I learned from the industry is that I think anyone likes to be ooh and ahhed when you come into a facility. So when we would design and do decor and decorate, that really put us above and set the trend for our brand.
I think that you're absolutely right. I agree 110%. And when you say the ooh and ah, it's really about, in my opinion, respecting and serving the audience that you're trying to bring into your venue. And that's, I think, what Traxx did. It's about knowing them and caring enough about them to want to give them the best experience possible. And I don't know if we get that anymore.
I think you're probably right. I think that it might be just about profitability, like in most companies and things of this nature, and not really putting it into the ooh and ah aspect of it. And so I think maybe we've gotten maybe a little lazy to where we only do things at Labor Day. And I just think that there is enough room out there for the scene to grow and to put on the big spectacles like there used to be. As you know, big clubs kind of went out, and lounges and things of this nature came back in. But I think that the time is it has come around again where people are ready to dance and not just be sitting in a lounge buying a bottle to entertain yourself.
And be seen.
Yeah, I just think that the gay community or anybody, we're gonna just narrow it down to the gay community. We like to go out and have fun and party, and I think that we just got caught into the whole entertainment scene of booths and lounge because we were in that downturn. But I think that the person that comes back with a dance club will do very well.
I think you're right. I think that it's absolutely time for the club scene to return and break away from the bars and lounges. People are tired of hookah, overpriced bottles, and sparklers in the air. People do want that spot. What made Traxx so iconic is that everyone went and everyone saw everyone. And it was a huge, gigantic community. And it transcended the warehouse, it transcended a space, and it became an entire community. It wasn't even, it was bigger than a space, bigger than a brand. It was a community where you could belong no matter where you fit on the economic spectrum, no matter where you fit on the sexuality spectrum, you belong there.
Well, I think, you know, once again, our biggest attributes were our decor, our high ceilings, and we used all of that to our ability to brand Traxx Atlanta for giving great parties and that energy. And I think that all of us, all the partners that I've had, we really endured that, you know.
You talk about profitability possibly being a motivating factor more so than service to the community for some in the event space now. Was Traxx profitable?
We were very profitable. And some instances, you know, you have break-even points. It depends on the star, the location, things of that nature. So the profitability was great.
So you can do both. You can be of high quality service and also make a profit.
You can.
Okay, and I'm going to talk about that. Like that's one of my last series of questions. But before we go into kind of like, because I want to talk about what can young people do to bring back a level and an era of service and profit to the community. Right, there is someone out there who is 22 years old and they just moved to Atlanta and they are realizing that what they're experiencing in the scene isn't it. That they're paying $60, jacked up prices, held lines to go into a club or a lounge that's supposed to be a club. Wait in line 20 minutes to get one drink that costs $20 and they're thinking to themselves, this is not how it's supposed to be. I want to talk to that person a little bit later in this conversation. But before that, Traxx had to make a move from Lucky Street. You guys were at the warehouse. The warehouse is no longer there. There are people watching this, probably many people who are going to see this, who don't even know why the Traxx, the original location, didn't endure. Why did you guys leave Lucky?
We left there because it was sold. That building was owned by a company called Ruby Reds, which are R.J. Gilbertson, who owned Fire Brazil right there on Peachtree and used to own Ruby Reds down in Underground. That the building was sold.
And now we have in that whole area, it's totally changed. It's nothing like it used to be because now we have an aquarium. We have...
And that was one of the, areas that, no one wanted to come to. It was our warehouse district, and that's why we were really able to be down there. No one bothered us. They don't call, they don't come.
They don't call, they don't come.
We
right.
didn't make any noise, so they didn't come.
And so when you guys left Lucky, you guys moved to Atlanta Live.
We went to the library up the street for a short time. The library, which was down on Marietta Street for a short time, and then we went to Atlanta Live.
In DeKalb County. How was that different?
That was very different because, as you know, leaving from Traxx and Marietta Street, we tried having girls and guys party together, which no one wanted to have. The lesbians didn't want to party with the girls, guys, and the guys didn't want to party. But we saw that differently because of Thugged Out Tuesdays. We saw that where they would come together.
And it was a fun time.
Right.
It was a fun time.
And so we brought that concept to Atlanta Live and created Traxx Girls with Melissa Scott. And that was that whole entity, which was a phenomenon within itself also, once again, because of the decor, the high ceilings. What we used every aspect of the facility.
It was a beautiful space.
Yeah.
It was, it was a different vibe. than the original
Right.
Traxx, but it
Right.
was it was still a very good vibe.
I think it was our elevation to where we should have gone to.
Right. And so as you guys were there, I remember, when you talk about bringing in celebrities, I remember seeing Lloyd. It was
Yeah.
before Lloyd was Lloyd, and he performed right on the stage.
Now, the only reason why we were able to do that is because we had the girls with us. And it wasn't just a guy.
And so they didn't mind performing.
Correct.
And I thought that was great. But again, I came from Mississippi. And in Mississippi, everyone partied together. Even when you go over, like when I visit
Right,
Houston,
right.
everybody parties together.
Yeah.
The segregation of males from females is very Atlanta. And you're right, we
Yes.
only would party on Thugged Out Tuesdays.
Yeah.
I didn't get to go to many of them, Phillip, because I was a teacher. And, I was, it had to be up so early, but I would go on our breaks. We would have like Thanksgiving break or we would have Christmas break. I didn't miss a Thugged Out. I didn't miss one.
Yeah.
It was indeed a time. So so what's one word that you would use to define the time at Atlanta Live? Just like we did with one word for Traxx on Lucky, one word for Traxx at Atlanta Live.
Amazing. Because, no one had ever done that where we brought all the girls and guys together in an aspect of such nature. And it still has not been done since.
And when I look back at that time frame, in the whole Traxx experience that I remember, I don't remember having a bad customer service experience. I don't remember rude bartenders. I don't remember like bad people at the door. I don't remember that. I don't remember
Because
that.
it
But
was-
I would have, because I'm very in tune to stuff like that.
It was such a happy time for people
Yeah.
to want to get. It seemed people wanted to be there.
And they were appreciative that they could be there.
Yeah.
And I never, that's just not kind of dawning on me as
And
I
they were,
reflect.
and I feel like they were proud of us also for doing what we did.
Yeah.
You know?
Extremely proud. I'm
Yeah.
still proud. I was
Yeah.
proud then. It was one for me as an individual. Traxx Atlanta was one of the definitive reasons I chose Atlanta. Because here's the thing,
Yeah.
that it showed me that in Atlanta, Black, gay people, members of the LGBTQA plus community, you were able to not just have a seat at the table, which happens in other cities, but you could own tables in Atlanta.
Yeah.
And that is not something that you have in many cities. In a lot of cities, members of the Black LGBTQI plus community are treated like even less than third-class citizens. They're so far below in terms of how they're treated and the treatment that they accept. And that wasn't the case in Atlanta.
Well, the way I really describe it, from even just doing travels around the country and parts of the world, is that Atlanta is a great mecca for Black Americans, to where they have opportunities here that they don't have anywhere in the country or world.
Phillip, is that still the case?
Yes.
I think
do.
we
In
want to
some-
believe it. I want to believe it.
I think that you still have a great opportunity as a Black person to start a business here and to move forward. And I do think if you have the wherewithal.
When you guys left Atlanta Live, you moved to this former skating ring, right? It used to be a skating
Yes,
rink
yeah.
off of Memorial
It's
Drive.
be Rainbow.
Rainbow, yeah.
Yeah.
What caused the move, and how did that new
Let's
transition
see,
work?
why did we leave Atlanta Live? Was contractual agreements and
You blew them up. You guys made them so profitable, they thought they could probably continue it without you.
yeah, it was contractual kind of a situation that ended that whole aspect, and it was just time for us to grow again. Yeah.
And it was a massive space.
I think what it ended up, they wanted more. They wanted more, like most companies, where we had an agreement and they wanted more, and we weren't ready to give up more. So we found a 50,000 square foot skating ring, and there was a gentleman in there that was really doing anything with it. Partnership with him, went in and built out certain aspects of it to give it the atmosphere of what it gave, and That was the third tier in the whole.
The third iteration of Traxx Atlanta,
Yeah.
located right there off Memorial. Crowds was just as massive, if not more so. Bigger space,
it was
way more people being
amazing.
brought in. I remember going there and seeing Nicki Minaj perform.
That was our last big concert there, and I mean, I was just amazed that we were able to build a stage that, our God rest in peace, Anthony Whitehead, very good friend of ours, did a lot of cosmetic stuff for us. He passed actually the day that we were supposed to, the week that we opened there. He passed, and it was very hard around that time, but. Yeah, that was a great facility.
And I remember going to like my first ball was right there at that location. It's awesome. I only went to one because I'm not like a super night owl. I just couldn't handle it. I went to two, but I went to my first one right there. So again, all these memories and all these great things that were brought in. What is the greatest lesson that you've taken with you from all of these amazing years at Traxx and applied it to where you are in your life now?
I think the biggest lesson that I have learned is the value of lesson of customer appreciation. The people that we served deserved everything that we gave them, and I'm just glad that I was a part and was able to be a part of that culture building aspect in these people's lives, and it enhanced my life and hopefully theirs.
So, when you now look back, we kind of go back to that young 22-year-old who's out there and like saying, "This isn't it," and who just might have that Phillip Boone innovation, that Phillip Boone ability to say, I'm going to make this, build this, and pioneer forward. What advice would you give to him?
Follow your passion. That's what everyone says. But you've got to believe in what you're doing and be behind it. And I believe that with the environment that's out here now, it's easier than ever with the platforms that young people have. You just can't. I try not to be. It's not really about you. It's about them. When you're doing a business, a lot of people get caught up into their own hypeness and not the business. And just give it all to the business, and the hype will follow you.
Give it to the business, and the hype will follow you.
Yes.
And when I look at the Traxx story, I see several lessons. Now, one, it takes time. Traxx wasn't built overnight. It takes time. It's a trajectory. Changes will happen. Things will happen. Opportunities will come, and you have to go with the flow and constantly push to be better and do better. But again, I think the key is being of service and of value. If it's about you, you may not, I don't know if you will sustain. But when you're driven by the purpose of serving others, I think you probably will do. I think you can have a lot stronger way to go.
Well, of course, we had competition back then. It was Loretta's.
I remember Loretta's. I
Loretta's.
never went, but I remember hearing about it.
And of course, yeah, David.
Did Loretta's open after Traxx?
Well, actually, Foster was here.
Okay.
Her husband had a bar here called Foster's on Peachtree, and he got sick, and she came down and took over the business and ended up having Loretta's.
And was her name Loretta?
It was, and she was from Detroit.
Okay.
And
Loretta sounds like a Detroit woman to me.
She was a hell of a lady.
Aunt Loretta.
She
I don't
was
know
a
where
hell
she
of a
was
lady.
from. Loretta's tough.
Actually, David was the first general manager at Loretta's when they opened, before we opened Traxx.
Wow.
Yeah, he sure was.
Wow.
He was the general manager there, and then we ended up opening Traxx on Marietta Street after that.
So we talked about you just having celebrated another birthday, and again,
Yes.
happy belated.
Thank you.
When you look back from 1983 to 2023, how has the world changed for Black gay men? From your perspective.
We've come a long way, baby, because back then we weren't able to be as free as we are now, and to come out like you can now, have coming out parties. I think that the opportunity for the community is very open and wide right now. However, you of course will always have government regulations and people that will not see you in the same eye that others see you. But one thing that I always stress is that we cannot get rid of racism. You can't change mindsets of people, but we have to go back to learning to tolerate one another. And with certain elections that have passed, we thought it would get better, but it actually made things a little bit more complicated. So I think we've got to go back to just the wherewithal to tolerate one another and our individualities.
What allows you to do that? Because I'm not a tolerant person. It's really, I'm not patient. I'm not tolerant. It's tough.
Well, patience.
But I agree with you. You are right. Phillip, you're right. We have to learn to tolerate those who we don't necessarily agree with. And we are only, because it's only going to grow, the division between us. So how do you tolerate?
Well, we weren't born with patience. And so it's something that, has to evolve within. I think it's going to start with community, because we know that life has changed, and the media things, and people are listening to things on the media that aren't true, and we know what is fact when it comes to family, friends, and loyalty. So the aspect of just respecting one another and having patience for one another, which we lost during COVID. It's just a different world out there, and we've got to really reel it back into. When I talk to a lot of young people today, they don't see the future like we did. They see it differently with global warming and the environment that's out there, the guns. I remember when we had a gun outbreak back in 80s, 90s, people were marching in the streets, for something to be done and people to wake up. And I think that now with the gun laws here, where you don't even need a permit to have a gun here, has really made it a really bad environment for the country, And so, what we've got to do.
We have a lot of work ahead of us, right? It's a lot of work. So when you talk about, young people necessarily not seeing the future in the same way that you guys were able to envision it, how do you now see the future?
I see the future right now as being very futuristic. We're going into environment where artificial intelligence, things that we need to put off another 10 years because we need to settle a lot of other just morale things before we can even get into artificial intelligence, as far as just getting along with one another. I see a lot of work to be done, unfortunately. It's really a bad environment. I hate to sound so bleak, but
we all living in the same world. We all living in the same world. So
I
it's
think
safe to say it's pretty bleak.
I think that we need to really start talking about reeling it back in. Reeling it back in. We knew that when computers, IBM, and all this stuff came about, everything wasn't going to be good for society. But once again, we go back to companies, money over people. And so we've got to address this money over people thing, because until we address that, we can't even address the environment, because people are making money off of things that mess the environment up.
Or that damage people's health and lives. And so the profit over the people is a constant thread in what causes irreparable harm to our world, to our country, and to ourselves. So I agree with you 100%. Would you do it over again? Like, would you right now, today, reopen Traxx?
I would. And
We need it, Phillip.
what? And you know, one other thing that we didn't hit on is the white pride, black pride, and how our organization tried to reach out to white pride.
I didn't know that.
In several years.
I didn't know that.
With different presidents that were there to add some equality, and it would sometimes get lifted and grabbed by a certain president, but the presidents didn't last. And so another president would coming in and drop the ball of the work we would be trying to do to bring some equality. But as you can see, there's still some discrimination, not discrimination, but segregation, or, you know, things that are not really just clear when it comes to the whole pride here in Atlanta.
Yeah, it's just as bad today as it's probably ever been in regards to the segregation of the communities, and I don't see that getting any better anytime soon.
Even though ground level is probably where people are getting along, you know? And I think a lot of times that people on the ground level are getting along. It's the people that are running and operating these facilities that kind of feed
into
the fire,
issues.
you know? Yeah.
How could, you know, do you think there will ever, I don't know there'll ever be a space where the two could truly merge. And I say that because oftentimes when I go into certain spaces, I don't feel welcome. I don't feel welcome in Blake's. I feel like Blake's has done a great job of ensuring that I don't feel welcome. Even as recently as, like, I want to say it was less than 6 years ago, they had like posted dress code that was extremely offensive to black people.
That.
But again, I'm not tolerant. And little things like that, I hold on to it for a long time. It's hard for me to want to even go into Bulldogs because of what they were doing in 1983. Because I've had too many friends of mine tell me that they remember when they would play Planet of the Apes on the screens in Bulldogs to even make the black people that persevere with 3 forms of ID get in still feel, you know, unwelcome. But I'm not the norm. I know that I'm not normal to be such a grudge holder. So,
well, I think that. Well, I mean, look at Friends.
Tell us about Friends, because see, people, that's now the #1 spot for young black gays in Atlanta. But tell them the history of Friends. What did it used to be?
Friends used to be an all-white bar, and
with a lot of country music.
But the thing about it is that I think that we didn't offer the spaces here to our community. And so they gravitated other places, or when a bar or a club is running out of air, they will have the gay community come in.
Doors. Well, Friends started to run out of air, and then they said, "Oh, we know black gays, come on in." And they did, and they've given them a whole new lifeline, they've infused them with a whole lot of cash. And Friends, the secret for it is that #1, it's cheap. It's free for some, but then they start charging $5 at a certain, or 10. And again, you know, for people in the, you know, black gay club promoters or event holders, they would never give the price point that would be most economical and look at the long-term gain or service to the community, and that's disappointing to me.
Well, there's only a few bars here that can strive and be successful and profitable like they are, because a lot of times some people are very hesitant in putting a lot of money into, per se, a gay business, because they feel like the gay monies
niche
are very fickle also.
They are.
Where, you know, they can support you today, and one of their girlfriends open up something tomorrow.
They gone.
And they gone. So, you know, when you're opening something today, it's not really opening it about to any group of people. It's about opening your brand and having followers and friends come to celebrate what you have to offer.
That's right.
And so we've come to that. I remember when 15 years ago where they said gay clubs would be obsolete after a while, but I still feel like we still need safe havens because you still do have a lot of businesses that don't want that element in there to be free the way you would want to be. Just like the dancer that got killed in New York for J setting at the
Sibley O'Shea.
he was, if he
Or
would have
O'Shea
been in,
Sibley.
just
Sibley.
because he wasn't in an environment that wasn't conducive to what the people who opposed him doing that happened. So that just shows you still need your safe havens where you can go and J set wherever you want to, and no one cares about you doing it.
I think that's a profound statement and a great place to pause, not end the conversation, because I think that we need to continue this throughout, whenever the next big issue is, or tons of things where your lived experiences will be of benefit to, this small but greater audience that I have. Phillip, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you for making time to come with me and be with me today, but also in the work that you've done over the course of celebrating now 40 years.
40 years.
To Black Gay Atlanta. So thank you. I celebrate you, and I'm glad you could be here.
Thank you, Zackory, for inviting me and having the curiosity to even investigate into who Phillip Boone is.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.